The night Lena realized her heart had betrayed her, rain was clawing at the windows like it wanted to break inside. She stood frozen in the living room, listening to the steady voice of the man she should never have loved. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, mature, full of concern. And that was what scared her most, because she knew in that moment her feelings were no longer harmless. They were forbidden. Lena was 24, struggling to build a life in the city after leaving her small hometown. She worked as a junior editor for a digital media company, earning just enough to survive. Her world was simple, sometimes lonely, but honest. The brightest part of it was Arga, her boyfriend of 2 years. Arga was kind, ambitious, and deeply in love with her. He talked about marriage as if it were already written by fate. Lena wanted to believe him. Everything changed the first time she visited Arga's family home. His father, Raka Pratama, opened the door himself. He was in his early 50s, tall, composed, with eyes that carried both warmth and sadness. There was nothing inappropriate about their first meeting. He welcomed her politely, asked about her work, her family, her dreams, but Lena felt something unsettling. Not attraction, she told herself, just respect, admiration, safety. Raka was a widower. His wife had died 10 years earlier after a long illness. Since then, he had devoted his life to raising Arga and building his company. He rarely spoke about his loneliness, but it lived quietly in his eyes. At first, Lena only noticed him because he noticed her. He remembered small things, the way she liked her tea, her nervous habit of touching her necklace when she was anxious. When Arga was busy or distracted, it was Raka who asked if she was okay. She told herself it meant nothing. But feelings don't ask permission. Over time, Lena found herself staying longer at the house, helping Raka prepare dinner when Arga was late, listening to his stories about youth, failure, and love lost. He never crossed the line, not once. And somehow, that made it harder, because the connection felt pure, unspoken, and painfully real. The guilt came slowly, then all at once. One evening, after a tense argument with Arga about his lack of time and emotional distance, Lena stayed behind. Raka noticed her red eyes and trembling hands. He didn't ask questions. He simply sat across from her and said, "You don't always have to be strong." That was the moment her walls collapsed. She cried harder than she ever had, not because of Arga, but because she knew she was falling for the wrong man. A man she could never choose without destroying everything. Raka felt it too. He tried to distance himself, spoke less, avoided being alone with her, but silence only made the tension louder. Both of them were fighting feelings they never asked for. The real challenge wasn't desire, it was morality. Lena hated herself for every heartbeat that quickened when Raka entered the room. She hated that she felt more understood by him than by the man she was supposed to marry. She tried to fix things with Arga, pushed herself to be patient, supportive, forgiving, but Arga was changing. Success had made him arrogant, emotionally absent. He listened less, demanded more. One night, the truth surfaced in the worst way. Arga accused Lena of being distant. She finally snapped and said she felt invisible. The argument escalated, harsh words flying without thought. And then Arga said something that shattered her. "You're too emotional. Maybe I should find someone more mature." Lena left the house shaking, heartbroken, and confused. She didn't realize Raka had heard everything from the hallway. Later that night, Raka knocked on her guest room door. His voice was calm but heavy. He told her she deserved to be heard, to be valued. Lena looked at him, tears streaming, and whispered the words she had been holding back for months. "I love you." Silence filled the room like a storm. Raka closed his eyes, pain etched across his face. He told her the truth he had never dared to say. He loved her too. But love did not give them the right to destroy Arga or themselves. That night, they chose restraint over desire. It was the hardest decision either of them had ever made. The next days were unbearable. Lena broke up with Arga, Not because of Raka, but because she finally accepted that their relationship was broken beyond repair. Arga was angry, confused, and deeply hurt. When he later sensed something between Lena and his father, the confrontation was explosive. Raka told Arga everything, not as an excuse, but as an act of honesty. He admitted his feelings, took responsibility, and asked for forgiveness he knew might never come. Arga felt betrayed by the two people he trusted most. He cut ties with his father, left the house, and disappeared from their lives for months. The consequences were brutal. Raka lost his son. Lena lost the man she once planned to marry, and for a long time they lost each other too. Raka asked Lena to leave, not because he didn't love her, but because he believed distance was the only way to heal the damage. Years passed. Lena grew stronger. She focused on her career, learned to live with regret without letting it define her. Raka stepped down from his company, living quietly, carrying the weight of his choices. Fate reunited them at a charity event 3 years later. They were older, calmer, and deeply scarred. They talked like two souls who had survived the same storm. This time, there was no secrecy, no lies. Arga had moved on. He had built his own life, found happiness, and eventually, forgiveness. Not easily, not quickly, but honestly. When Raka and Lena finally chose each other, it was not in passion, but in responsibility, respect, and acceptance of their past. Their love was no longer forbidden, but it was forever shaped by the pain it once caused. Their greatest challenge was not society's judgment, but forgiving themselves. And that became their resolution. The story of Lena and Raka is not about scandal or desire. It is about how love can appear in the most unexpected, painful places. It teaches that not all love is meant to be acted on immediately, and that true maturity sometimes means waiting, sacrificing, and choosing what is right over what feels good. In the end, love that survives truth, time, and consequence is the kind that heals, not destroys. Morning arrived quietly, as if the world had decided not to disturb Lena's guilt. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, touching her face, but it brought no warmth. Her eyes opened, heavy and sleepless, replaying every moment from the night before. The words she had spoken to Raka echoed in her mind like a confession she could not erase. I love you. The truth felt dangerous now that it had been spoken, even though nothing physical had happened. Sometimes emotions alone were enough to destroy lives. She washed her face slowly, staring at her reflection. The girl looking back at her seemed older, burdened by a secret she could not share. Today, she told herself, she would act normal. She would smile at Arga, listen to his plans, and pretend her heart had not shifted in a way she could no longer control. At breakfast, Arga was distracted, scrolling through his phone, talking excitedly about a new business opportunity. Lena nodded at the right moments, but her thoughts drifted. She noticed how he no longer asked about her day, how his dreams had stopped including her. It wasn't hatred she felt toward him. It was sadness. A quiet realization that love, when neglected, slowly withers. Raka joined them briefly, his presence filling the room with a tension only Lena could feel. Their eyes met for a second too long. Nothing was said, yet everything was understood. Raka looked tired, as if he had not slept either. He greeted them politely, then left for work early, creating distance the only way he knew how. That distance became the new challenge. Days passed, heavy and restrained. Raka avoided Lena completely. If she entered a room, he found a reason to leave. If she spoke, he answered with careful neutrality. Lena understood why he did it, yet the silence hurt more than any argument. She began to question herself. Was she selfish for feeling this way? Was love always this cruel? Arga noticed the change but misread it. He assumed Lena was becoming demanding, emotional, difficult. One evening, after she asked him to spend more time together, he laughed lightly and said she was overthinking again. The dismissal cut deep. Lena didn't argue. She simply went quiet, realizing that the man she loved no longer saw her pain. The pressure built from all sides. At work, Lena struggled to focus. At home, she felt invisible. And in her heart, she carried a love she could not touch, name, or defend. She began to understand that the real challenge was not choosing between two men, but choosing between honesty and comfort. Everything reached a breaking point during a family dinner. Arga arrived late, irritated, barely acknowledging Lena. Raka tried to keep the atmosphere calm, but the tension was sharp. When Lena gently mentioned a plan they had discussed weeks earlier, Arga snapped. He accused her of nagging, of not understanding his priorities. His words were loud, careless, and humiliating. Raka stood up. For the first time, his voice was firm. He told Arga to respect the woman he claimed to love. The room fell silent. Arga stared at his father in shock, then turned to Lena with suspicion. Something shifted in his expression. A seed of doubt had been planted. That night, Lena cried alone, realizing that the walls were closing in. She could no longer pretend. The situation was becoming unfair to everyone involved. Love, she learned, becomes toxic when it hides behind lies. The next day, Lena made a decision. She asked Arga to talk, not to fight, not to accuse, just to speak honestly. She told him she felt lonely, unheard, and uncertain about their future. Arga reacted defensively at first, but when he saw she wasn't blaming him, only being truthful, his anger softened. Still, he wasn't ready to change. He asked her to wait, to be patient, to understand his ambition. Lena finally understood something painful but freeing. Waiting had become her habit, not her choice. That evening, she packed her bags. She told Rucka she was leaving the house to stay with a friend. He didn't stop her. His eyes showed pain, but also relief. Distance was the only way to prevent a greater disaster. Before she left, he said quietly that she was strong, even if she didn't feel like it. Those words stayed with her longer than any promise. As Lena walked away from the house that had changed her life, she didn't know what the future held. All she knew was that forbidden love had taught her a powerful lesson. Loving someone does not always mean staying. Sometimes it means stepping back before everything breaks. And this was only the beginning of the consequences they would all have to face.